Grace was going through it. And by through it, I mean she cried every day for 30 years, or maybe it was 100 or 150, but might have only been 3 years tops. She wished it was because of something noble, like world hunger or the things going on in the news, but she didn't think it was because of that. Grace was going through it because she had a breakup like 100 years ago and still wasn't over it. She didn't even use Facebook, but she'd log on just to see his profile picture and sigh this deep, sad sigh, and then write him another letter she had no intention of actually sending him because he'd probably just leave her on read. Or worse, say he felt the same way and then ghost her all over again. She wrote a few poems about him, and they were all shitty, which made her sadness worse. She dyed her hair, switched her makeup, changed her whole wardrobe, had a few crushes, and she still wasn't over it. She cried every time anything reminded her of him, and sure, it was better after the first year, and she eventually stopped being a massive wreck, but something as simple as a movie title would have her lamenting the loss of this dude. Whenever she had a night off, she'd open a new bottle of drugstore wine and dramatically sing along to every sad love song she could find. Feet and arms splayed across the couch in the apartment she shared with her cousin Socorro. Socorro would roll her eyes, but she was going through it too. She was in love with someone who maybe loved her back, but neither of them had said anything about it, so each day felt like 100 tiny agonies. But that's a different story. So Socorro would front and roll her eyes as she thought she should do, before dramatically flinging herself on the armchair next to Grace to show her support. They'd repeat the same 2 songs, You Cheated by the Shields, and It's Okay by the Sunglows, 2 or maybe 3 times, or sometimes even 20 until they'd eventually fall asleep. But it was clear Grace needed to get over him, and after 30 years of going along with it, hoping Grace just needed to cry it out, the crying didn't stop, it just got worse. Socorro decided she needed reinforcement. She tried the usual things, limpias, therapy, a psychiatrist, but though Grace tried it all, nothing was working. So, Socorro called the primas. She issued a red alert and they ascended from downtown, from East LA, from Southgate, from Paramount, from Bell, from Compton, from Palmdale, from Riverside, until there were 10 bodies congregated in their living room on a long weekend right before the full heat of summer could hit. But after the heat itself had started, they brought beer and chips and ice cream, agua florida, and rosaries, and they presented them to Gracie, who sat confused on the couch, cross-legged on an embroidered pillow they brought her, accepting each gift as if she'd never seen a gift before. "Y esto? What's up with all this? We're not leaving until you feel better," one of them said. "We're not leaving until you're over him," dijo la otra. So the first day they listened to rock and cumbias, post-punk and R&B. They drank and burned candles, and they made Grace get up to dance too. But she didn't really. She swayed in place, sighed at her phone so much they locked her phone in a security deposit box they brought with them and told her she couldn't look at it until they saw results. So then she swayed more miserably until she killed all the vibes, and they sat, defeated in the heat, sweating despite the fan going full blast, and occasionally groaning the same refrains she'd heard 1,000,000,000 times since he left her. "You'll find someone else, mija. It's going to be okay. You're so much better without him." "Am I, though?" And she swallowed their advice the same way she swallowed their wine, but she still felt empty, and so she drank more and more, but she was not full on words or drink, but both words and drink ran out, and they went to sleep dissatisfied in blankets on the floor or on the couch or on the armchair, feeling the first day was a massive failure. The next day, they awoke hopeful and strong, trekking down the block for warm croissants with ham and cheese and more chips and some coffee, and to a neighbor's friend's house for agua bendita. They offered it all to Grace again, and she graciously accepted, but by 4 p.m. the sun was burning, and they still weren't making any headway. "Mija, you have to get over him," they said, desperate. "I can't give up." Their voices came down like thunder, and Grace cowered on the embroidered pillow while they asked, "Why not?" "I know I can work out. I just have to be patient, you know." You've been patiently waiting for him for 150 years, and you went out with him for 2 months, mija. The return investment's not even worth it. They were a good 2 months. What happened to the guy you were in love with before him, the tall dude? Didn't he ask you out or something? Yeah, but he rejected me 50 years ago, remember? I can't trust him now. Okay, yeah, but you can't trust this fool either. He's basically a rebound, and you've taken longer to get over him than you took to get over the other dude. You have some serious issues with rejection, Gracie. This dude's not a rebound. Definitely is. No, he isn't. We think you have some misplaced feelings, mija. I don't know what that even means, she said, though she really did. You ever think about it like this? You'd just turned 18, you were getting over a dude you didn't even go out with, shit was bleak with your parents, you had no stability or a sense of direction, and this fool shows up all Prince Charming-like, and for 2 months makes you feel like a complete and total princess. And you've always been a fucking princess, but it's the first time a guy also seems to believe it, and your life still sucks so bad, but for 2 months you don't care if it sucks because he's nice to you, and you're finally ready to accept that from a guy. Then shit ends, and you're back to your life, and it's the same as before, except now you have to deal with it, and you haven't. Gracie stared at her hands. But I have. No. So they held finger guns to her head until she could be honest with them. I felt so stupid. I felt so stupid because I was right to not trust it and not trust him, and then I thought, well, maybe I'm the reason it fell apart, and if I'm the reason, then I should fix it, right? My insecurity ruined it, and I should make up for that. But you don't have to. I jinxed my own relationship. Mija, do you really want to be with him after all this? One of the older primas asked. After what he did to you? After all this time and all this bullshit? Every time he disappears and ghosts you? Are you ever going to be able to be with him without seeing her? Without knowing that he didn't choose you? You're going to wait around for him to be single again? Gracie, this wasn't some cute misunderstanding. This was his conscious decision to fuck with you. The fact that he comes back sometimes shows he cares, right? Their disapproval was so loud she trembled. Don't do that Times of Cholera shit, Gracie. We believe in you. Gracie never finished reading Love in the Times of Cholera, neither had they, but she understood what they were trying to say, so she nodded. Eventually the sun started setting, and they settled in for a night of movies and snacks. They changed into their batas, and Grace started crying so much her bata became soaked, and the pillow became soaked, and her prima's batas became soaked, and everything was so fucking soaked. Socorro sighed and got a paper towel to start drying it up. But when she picked up the paper towel, she saw the face of her first love and began crying too. She looked at Grace and felt that the same tears were running down both her cheeks. And then Myra began crying, and then Belen, and then Sandra, and then everyone else was crying, and they cried until 9 p.m. when their vatas became dry, and one of them suggested opening the ice cream in the freezer, and the other said, yeah, I'll pick a new movie. But no one moved. They sat staring into their own memories of rejection, of heartbreak, of fear. They were very quiet, but not sad. They looked at each other with their eyes wide, and they came to the same conclusion. The mission to get Grace back to herself had failed. Maybe they could never do it. Maybe she was beyond them. Gracie lay curled up on the embroidered pillow, surrounded by snacks. Every once in a while she reached for a bowl near her head and grabbed handfuls of popcorn, eating silently, her eyes vacant. She missed her phone, wondered if he'd messaged her. She didn't say anything, but they'd occasionally see her look up at the security deposit box and sigh. Her cousins felt they'd failed her. They'd have to leave in a few days, and so far, all they'd done is cry and wallow in sadness together. What if, the minute they left, Gracie just continued to cry and never stopped? What if all that crying just made her sadder? What if they'd made the hope of getting better seem impossible? The bowl of popcorn emptied. The primas took that as a sign to get up and move. They got ice cream, stretched, picked a night's worth of movies. Gracie took her empty bowl of popcorn into the kitchen and grabbed another bag, put it in the microwave. One of the primas followed her. Hey, Gracie, are you okay? She put her hand on Gracie's shoulder. and suddenly, the world popped. They assumed it was fireworks. The tiny kitchen flooded with light and the sound of little explosions filled their ears. They looked out the window. Outside, fireworks for a holiday they didn't celebrate lit up the sky. Without taking her eyes off them, Gracie opened the microwave door, grabbed the bowl of popcorn and hugged it to her chest. Overcome with tears, the older prima reached for her little cousin's hand, and immediately 300 years were washed from Gracie's face. The light was no longer outside but between their fingers, and when the older prima pulled her into a hug, the light reached for the rest of the primas, pulling them in, creating a circle of familial touch that pulsed as loud as the fireworks outside. Was it this? Was touch? Almighty familial touch, their fingers stroking her head as her mom did when she was a little girl, whispering affirmations that had nothing to do with her sadness the way their grandma once did, crying, not feet apart, but into each other's shoulders, what Grace needed all along. Was it not time she needed, but help in a way her innermost secret kid self could understand? When she'd cried and scraped her knee so bad it left bruises as a kid, the scolding didn't help. Holding her did. "I'm ready," she said. "I'm ready to move on." And that's when it happened. When the never-ending flow of tears dried up. When the air seemed to go still, but it was not graceful and smooth, because then Gracie felt something move out of the bowl of popcorn she was still holding with one hand. Something moved, and she screamed, dropped the bowl, broke the hug. Pieces of popcorn were climbing up her hand like a flood of buttery ants, were climbing up her prima's arms and backs, up their necks and faces. One of them screamed, then another, then a third, then all the other cousins were screaming, and soon they were running around the living room and kitchen covered in popcorn. The popcorn that had been inside the microwave exploded out of it. More than should have exploded, more than should be possible, and crawled over the walls and ceiling. The pop hadn't been fireworks. The popcorn was chattering menacingly as it made its way to them and on them, and their screams only intensified when Gracie felt the popcorn sink its teeth into her and start biting. Tiny, sharp teeth sunk into their skin, and blood stained the popcorn so that it looked like it was stained and tapatio, but it wasn't. Their insides were being eaten, their muscles were being torn, the popcorn dug into their skin, and their screams were only unheard by the neighbors because of the fireworks thundering outside. Gracie lost her voice with screaming, or maybe the popcorn was just eating her vocal cords. She felt it invading her insides, her kidneys and her lungs, her heart, her brain, her eyes. The popcorn was eating her alive. Around midnight, the fireworks were still raging outside, and there was not a kernel of popcorn left in the house. It feasted on them. It vanished through every vent and crack and creak, so 10 skeletons sat around a living room drinking micheladas. They played everything from rock to cumbias. They felt at peace, and at some point, they opened the security deposit box and gave Gracie her phone back. She checked it. There was one message from her ex. She sighed, extended her skeleton hand. A single piece of popcorn crawled in from the windowsill, scuttled across the tile and carpet, climbed up her bones to the phone, and ate that too.